moving right along. Item B. Anything else before I move forward? Revaluation update. Tax Administrator, Mr. Richard Lightner. Welcome, Richard.
Well, the time of talk is over, so I guess I could say Merry Christmas. Compared to the last two, we lost like 25% of our value. That one reval, one we put off because it didn't have sales and we had an 8-year cycle. Things have rebounded. This presentation, some of it followed along with other pieces that we've already seen, so I won't stop at every slide. At extended time, I'll go into the new data so you'll see the actual numbers. Why do we revalue property? Basically, the state of North Carolina says we have to. Some states don't have a revaluation cycle, and it's left up to the counties, and most of those states are been under massive lawsuits for one reason or other. So we need to be between 90 and 100% of value. If not, I'll use Duke Energy. If they have $100 million in value, if we drop below 90%, they won't pay on $100 million. They'll pay on whatever percentage we are. 86, they'd pay on $86 million. So that's why you have to have it. What do? We collect and review sales. We look at all the maps. We got to route them. We look and analyze the sales from 17 and 18 because those are the most efficient, telling what the market is doing now. I know there's been sales in 15 and 16, but as you go through these sales, hopefully as you get close to reval, things are improving, and so you want the closest sale date. If you go to the bank, you don't want necessarily somebody valuing your property back in 15 if you're trying to get a loan in year 19. The same way with us. We have to be at 100% of value. We develop pricing manual, schedule values. You guys approved that a few meetings back, so it's set in stone, and now we applied the values. This is a long section. This will be on the website in about a day. There's an older version out there, but it'll be replaced with this. These are the things that you go through when you are setting values. You look at the property, you look at sales, you identify certain areas of concern. You send notice of value. That's where we are right now. We'll send those notices in January. You can have an informal review then. Basically, that's all by turning back written information. Even today, we still have roughly 50% of our population that owns property don't live in Macon County, so the written information is much easier for them to access. So,
you said 50%?
I'm sorry?
50%, you said?
Yeah, because you have to look at the last census, they put like 47% of the actual structures are owned by somebody that don't have a local address. And when you do the population multiplier, it was 2.1%. See, so they're not going to be here. They may be here 9 months a year, but they're not domiciled here. We set hearing dates. After the hearing dates, you go to the Board of E&R. Mr. Bill has been our chairman a couple of years on that, and it's a long process. Historically, what I've seen, Macon County since 1980, 83, people appeal values here more than they do in some other counties. You got a lot of retired people, they got a lot of time. People that are working in a busy environment, they don't spend that much time. They may send in a written appeal informally, but they won't show up at the hearing actually in front of the Board of E&R. Now that's even changed here. People will do written appeals here more so than showing up at the Board of E&R, or they'll get a attorney or somebody show up for them. After that time, then you got the time for appeal in Raleigh, and it has to be within 30 days of the notice if we changed or did not change your value. The Board of Equalization since the early 91, I guess, has been volunteers. There has been maybe a commissioner on there at one time, but they're all people in the real estate industry, being appraisers, being realtors or something like that. So we have a really good board. Some of them been on there 15 or 20 years, and it's worked really well for Macon County. The approaches to value, you have three: comparable sales, income, and cost approach. Income approach, it applies basically to commercial properties. Mr. Bill has so many rental units out there. What that rent brings in, less his expenses, is tell you what he could sell that to. It's a financial approach. Comparable sales, you sell your house and the man down the street has one identical to yours, built at the same time, it should be similar in value. And cost approach, what does it cost to build that thing? Cost does not always equate value. There are some people put more cost in it than they get in the market. There's some people put less cost and they're in a good neighborhood and they'll get more return. Market value, this is actually defined in law, is the most probable selling price that a property will bring in a competitive market where both buyer and seller are motivated and well informed. So you should know what you're buying, should know what you're selling. One thing is, like, if we know the highways. If I got a piece of property and I don't know highways coming in, but the buyer does, well, you know, he's got an advantage over you, and vice versa. So that's what it says. You should know all facts about the property. If it's got a deed restriction, not a deed restriction, something like that. This is not market value. Transactions from auctions, short sales, some estate sales, liquidations, foreclosures, family or associated sales. As we went through the foreclosures, you'd see a lot of people, banks taking back properties, and then somebody would flip it real quick. It wasn't actually the market for that house. When bank takes it back, they're not in the business to be a realtor. They try to turn it. So those kind of sales are not recognized. What affects value? Of course, remodeling, supply and demand, local economy, cost of replacing similar. You can see the price of housing, what it's done from the 80s. When I was at Lowe's in the 80s, you know, you could buy a house and land for $40,000. I mean, new. So that's not the market now. It's, you know, $150 a foot for an average house up is depending where you are. Highland's a lot higher, the lake's higher because you bring in labor, you got shipping and all that. One back from there is, if I can get back. Make a growth rate. Right there, this is really important because it goes on with supply and demand. If you look in the early 80s and 90s, we're way down there around 20,000 population, thereabout, and we increased there in the hot period, say 90 to 2010. But if you look at the last 11 through now, we're not really increasing. It looks more dramatic on that graph, but the lines are really shorter, so we are not growing near as fast. What that means is there's not that big of demand on the properties like there used to be. At one time, you put it on the market and they was selling it real quick. If you look at the real estate sales and things like that, we used to have maybe 4,000 sales and maybe 1,500 building permits a year, and out of that 1,500 building permits, be 400 or 500 houses or major additions. Now, last year we probably had like 70 new houses So it's a totally different market. Parcel growth, if you look at that, it's kind of stagnated too from about 10 to 18. It's staying right around the 43, 44,000. So when you're not splitting land, you're not gaining a lot of value, because that's when we gained a lot of value is when people built all these subdivisions on top of them subdivisions for houses. We built golf courses in the 80s and 90s up in Highlands. It was just a massive growth we had. Indicators, these are lot sales. If you look at 17, 18, 17 went up a little bit, but right now these are projected out through the end of the month. They actually are going down again this year, unless there's a major rush of deeds between now and December 31st. We're not going to meet last year's events. Total sales, as you can see there, 17, 18 is flatlined. It came up from 15, but it's still flatlined. If you look at the different types of housing, especially the 500,000, 1 million, 2 million, it's very misleading there. The 2 million, I don't have any this year, but the 1 million, it had a little bit more this year, but the 500,000 range ones, that group is not growing. Okay, now we get into the value. What is revenue neutral? If you recall, you have to have a revenue neutral tax rate, and that allows for your growth of the last 3 years on top of the tax rate, plus what your adopted budgets are by the new value. To make that simple, our tax value in 18 was $8 billion. Times the tax rate, roughly you wanted to bring in about $28 million. However, to get that for 19, the new value is like 7.6. Then you got public service being utilities, 159 million. Motor vehicles bringing 335 million. So you're going to have a value of about 8.1 billion. Less appeals, 25 million. Less homestead exemptions, which is 60 million. You're going to have about $8.1 billion. 8.1 billion, that only is a 0.003% growth. Real estate value, it's a 0.004% growth. So there is, basically you're breaking even. All this tells you the market has not grown. It's stabilized the last 4 years. It's a little bit stagnated. There are parts of the market that have seen increases, and we'll discuss that in a minute. Tax revenue neutral. That 29.3 is what actual was reoccurring money that needs to come in next year based on this budget you just adopted. And the reason that being, the last night before you adopt the budget, you put like $1.2 million in there that's reoccurring. Unless you replace that with some other money, you got that in the budget. So if you're going to figure your rate, it's based on what happened this year. So you divide that by the new value, you come up with 36.2 cents. Then you got your growth factor in there they allow. It's averaging about 1%. So that's 3.66. Then you got a collection factor. We're at 98.5%, so you got to take that off because you can't collect 100%. So when you do that, you're looking at a tax rate of 37 cents. That's on numbers today. That's not what accepted when you do the budget. If you put the other things in, if their values change dramatically, which I wouldn't say they would, but that's what you're looking at. That's your starting point. And where you end up, that's a process your board does. That's not mine. The reason I did that, to give you a comparison of what average people are going to look at when they get a tax bill based on this mathematical formulas we just went through. These are some of the same places I used in 15. So if you see the base tax, now I'm not using the fire tax or the landfill fees or anything like that, because each fire district has a tax and landfill fees. So this is just your base property tax. Last year, this house paid $909. The value is dropping to around $215. Rate is going to be 37 cents. So their base tax $798. They're saving of $111 or 12.2% breaking their tax. This one goes from 93 to 100. Increase of $46 or increase of 14% on their tax. Some of these will start looking familiar. This one is 1.13. It goes to 1.164. Base tax $39.70 to $43. Increase $338 or 8.5%. $396 to $373. The base tax stays basically the same. 1.5 to 1.6. It sees a $492 increase in taxes, or 9%.
Beautiful landscape.
Somebody's hired somebody well.
Please do that.
It froze up on you. It's still trying to come down from Highlands.
Yeah.
Here's 111,000. It goes to 104. Difference is nothing. 127 to 116. It's a decrease of $14 or 3.2%. As you can see, different houses in different locations, different construction, different ages, they all are different, because the market for each one of those houses are different. And location. Some of these may be in Smithbridge or out in a remote area. Some may be in a nicer neighborhood. This here is one of the bigger houses in the county, but this one's sold, so I know, what's going on here. We have 10 million. It's going to 13 million. The increase is 13,000 or 38% tax increase. And it's sold for more than that, 13%. This one, 122, is going to 161, $170 increase or 39%. Some of these things, they get changed, remodeled, upgraded, and effective age are taken better care of, so they don't keep depreciation. They'll go up in a class. This one, 459, 440, increased $27 or 1%.
Good looking house.
This one's 754, goes to 737, basically a $310 difference in tax, or 22%. Some of those that one had deferment, so if you got a deferment, your deferred amount, unless your house or your improvements increased in value, your land, you'll pay the same on land. Your deferment will be the same thing. 197 to 196, $37 increase or 5.3%. Finally, reassessment of volatile. There's established procedures. We've been doing this a number of years. My first one I started in '87, soon after I got here. So I've done every one since then. And like I said, you always have people. I think it's more of an educational process. You got so many people moving and coming in, and new people coming in, and it's always different. Georgia's different, South Carolina different, Florida, every state's different. So when they come in here, they want educated, and they come and talk to us about it. you have to be equal between properties. If you're in a neighborhood and all the houses are the same, it would be great, but we have a lot of custom homes and different things in different places. You could be in the country club of Highlands, but if you don't have a view, or if you're on a golf course, you know, that affects it. Where like if you go to Charlotte, you got the neighborhoods, every house in there is in 200,000 range to 225. You go to the next neighborhood, maybe 150 to 175. You know, every house in there is going to sell. I just looked at one down in Somerville, a little subdivision where my daughter lives. They have 14 sales in there, and they was all grouped in 160 to 175,000 dollars, every one of them. It's like cookie cutter. We don't have that here. You could have nice homes mixed with, you know, older homes, where you could have some. I've been to some of the big houses. They have some old original properties there that you go through before you get to that big house I just showed you or something. So it's a mixed game. Things to remember: we have to be 100% of market value. Values may not be what the owner has invested in the property. You know, if you bought it 10 years ago, you can't say, well, I paid X dollars for it. You got to show what the market is today. Different classes change at a different rate. Different locations change at a different rate. Percentage of increase or decrease is not a reason in the state of North Carolina for appeal. Burden of proof is on the taxpayer. All this is proven by state courts and that. These are things that they've gone through the courts, and this is what the basic demand is. And they wrote the assessments are assumed correct unless you overcome the burden of proof. And this basically, they're going to be mailed mid-January. The informal appeals will be written, and the Board of Equalization by law has to start in April, and it has to shut down so many weeks after it starts. Now, it may shut down for accepting new appeals. That don't mean they quit working. They'll have to go through that whole stack. Sometimes it may, 3 weeks more work, but they can't accept no new appeal. All this stuff has to be advertised in the papers and everything else. It's on your notices when you get it. What's going to happen? This is the one that probably would cause some people to not be happy. If you look down there, and as you can see, overall the values are, we only gained 0.42%, that's gross. But if you look at the different townships, there could be a reason why the value went up or went down or changed or whatever. One thing we are seeing at more and more of, people don't want to be way out. I'm not picking on any location, but for an instance, they don't want to be way out in the end of Cowee. They don't want to be way out in Burntown. There are people that want to be there, but that market is smaller and smaller. People want to be closer to town. The town of Highlands, and Jim can tell you, people are building expensive homes in the town of Highlands now instead of being in the clubs. Some people don't want to be in the clubs no more. So that reflects in the value. Nantahala, at one time, when I first started this, front lot on the lake was $25,000. Well, they got up to about $750,000. Well, people paying that now, they want to be somewhere closer to Gainesville or Clayton or something. They want restaurants and all that, and from Nantahala, it's isolated, so the values have actually decelerated there. So anyway, that's the thing. And I always get asked, the last column, I added it yesterday, what is that percentage of value in each township? And these are just mathematical numbers, so I think everybody should be aware of it. The town of Highlands, in the township of Highlands, makes up 46% of the taxes. If you throw in Scaly Mountain, they're making up 54%. And then the next largest will be the town of Franklin and Franklin City. If you get out in your outlying areas, everybody else, these two districts supplement, because this is where most value is. Now, one thing I didn't put in this, when I add the personal property back in, the town of Franklin picks up more value than the other townships, because you got Duke Power, you got, Verizon, you got all these big utility things closer to town. So in cars, you'll have, you have about 15,000 vehicles in the Franklin Township, where you go to Highlands, you got 2,000. So, cars is a big part of money. So when you add all that together, it gets closer. But for just real estate, that's where we are. This is your notice that you'll get in the mail. It's same as the last 2 years. The only thing we changed the dates and things and added an email address, because so many people email. It's the way we converse with them now. And it gives you option of putting in some comparables. In-house reappraisal. We're talking about, the 30-year type people and all that. Well, when I came here, I think it was Shorty Mason and Raymond Shepard, and those type of people was on the board, Miles Gregory and that, and they said, well, we want it done different than it used to be. So that's how we got into doing in-house. So for the last number of reappraisals, we have saved the county $5.2 million. So, and that continues to every time. This year around, we saved $956,000. So that's why you never want to just do it one way. You always want to improve on where you're going. Now, your turn to talk if you have any questions or comments.
What are you seeing in just raw mountain land?
It's going down.
Going down.
Yeah, I mean, at one time
You're talking about lots or multiple acreage or?
acreage and all. I mean, at one time, any acreage would be over 10, 15,000. Now, 10 or 15, you get more farmable type stuff. At one time, something like Gold City up there, it'd be less than $1,000 an acre. We're not at that yet. We're not back to 1,000. But depending on access to your rural land, people are buying larger tracts to put a home. I mean, there are still some of those people, they want a little isolation, so they buy a bigger rural tract to get 1 or 2 building sites. But they're harder to sell too. They're not near expensive as it used to be. Good farmland, maybe 15,000 compared to, it used to be 25.
And these older subdivisions with the...
Older subdivisions, there's so many out there. Most, Echo Valley, you just name them. There's probably lots of lots in there that don't perk and don't meet. And they're, you're going to have half a lot of work done. Have new surveys, see if it's perks, see if a lot of things. Because a lot of these smaller subdivisions are out in the county and they may only be 30-acre lots. I mean, I don't know what you can build on 30 acres if you don't have water and sewer somewhere available. So there's a lot of those out there.
Yes.
I mean, and even like Porter Creek, I mean, they hadn't sold no lots in there much since it started. And they're asking a higher price than what we can put on it because they're not selling. So, you have that all the time.
Any further questions?
Thank you.
I got one, Richard, real quick. Just because I know I'm going to get asked, just like I do every time. I can't remember the answer. So, do y'all take zoning restrictions into consideration?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's always been, I know up in Highlands, they've been better getting us zoning stuff to us. The normal process, it comes down through our mapping and GIS and it goes into our files. But if they make changes, they're supposed to notify us as soon as possible. Sometimes if there is a zoning change or a zoning question, that usually comes out pretty early. People come in and say, but this has been changed from commercial back to B1 or something like that, and then we adjust. Because the highest and best use is based on what's legally permissible. So, you know, I may have a great piece of property, but if I can't put a commercial on there, it's still not legally
Well, I think that was like, because there's a major price variation between a B1 in Highlands and a B2 in Highlands because of the restrictions on those two. I'll hear the B2 people complaining, and nothing I can do about it, as you know.
Yeah.
They'll be complaining, well, how come I'm getting the same as the B1? And so I don't know that they are or they're not. I don't know that they know they're not.
No, there is a difference up there, and I know right down Main Street it changes.
That's right.
But what comes into play is sometimes, you know, some B2s will sell at a pretty high rate because it's still location.
Sure.
I mean, Highlands is pretty unique because you get the top up there and it flattens out for about a mile. So when you get on top of that plateau, you know, you can go right down the line and see the sales increase.
Yeah.
When you get right in the middle, at say B1, you know, you don't have to have parking and everything else. So per square foot, it's much higher.
Much higher, that's right. That's right. Okay. Thank you.
You
One thing
mentioned
that-
around the clubs, Richard, I know for many, many years that they've always came, you know, all the country clubs that came, are they still, is that golf course still the main thing? Those houses around it, is that changing too?
Yeah, Highlands Country Club is pretty still demand. Cause they've come back some. But what I'm hearing, I talk to realtors and that's why you see downtown Highlands, these $1 million patio homes or whatever they call them. And they're selling at a brisk rate. I'm saying $1 million get you in, and some going for $2 million. People want to be close to town. They don't want to pay those. Golf is like anything. The golfing sector is shrinking. There's less people playing golf nationwide. So I think that still shrinks when you're talking about coming up here and paying a big price to be in a club. People rather buy a nice place located downtown or something. One thing I need to point out, and it's affecting values, and this will be online, so you'll see those values whenever you want. The town of Franklin and Franklin City are not growing, and we're probably pretty generous with the town of Franklin, but as long as we have the shopping centers we have with so many vacancies and other type buildings with vacancies, I can't put values on those things that the income stream does not support. And Kmart shopping center, when they're empty, and Walmart sitting over here, Ingles is sitting on it for $3.6 million, I can't put no higher on there. So that's really affecting growth, and that's why Highlands is taking a bigger value growth than the town of Franklin. Highlands, they're pretty full most of the time, and they're even turned into, like this time of year through spring, it used to be dead. Well, there are people going up there all the time now. Well, when you got so many empty buildings in town, that affects what the value's going to be. And the bank just sold, or I don't know, over there where Bojangles going, they sold it for like $200,000 less than what it was just 2 or 3 years ago. So, you know, that's going to continue unless some economic changes happen in this area down low. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Richard.